We're starting strong with an incredible panel featuring vice presidents for research from each of our 5 host sponsor institutions. These distinguished leaders have come together to discuss research, leadership, collaboration, and the evolving role of innovation in higher education. It's going to be an inspiring conversation. Let's get started. To moderate this exceptional panel, please welcome to the stage Dr. Almesha Campbell, honorary member of the FNAI and Assistant Vice President for Research and Economic Development at Jackson State University. A warm welcome to Almesha.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. I see you're eating breakfast, but I expect some energy, right? We got here early, but thank you all so much for being here. And our panel is made up of Vice President for Research, myself being a Vice President of Research at Jackson State University. So it gives me great honor to be with my colleagues and hope to learn something from them today. So for now, I'll call up our panelists. And first up is Derek Eberhart, Associate Vice President of Research at the University of Georgia, and my colleague at Autumn. Our next panelist is Dr. Sivakumar, Vice President for Commercialization and Chief Commercialization Officer at Georgia Tech. Our next panelist is Dr. Rick Kittles, Senior Vice President for Research at Morehouse School of Medicine. Our next panelist, Dr. Donald Hamelberg, Interim Vice President for Research and Economic Development at Georgia State University. And last but not least, Dr. Deborah Watkins Bruner, Senior Vice President for Research at Emory University. And when you see 2 ladies on the stage with 4 men, you know we're going to take charge. As someone said, as we should. I hear you. Good morning again. I am honored to moderate this important conversation on the future of leadership in research and innovation. Across higher education, we are at a pivotal moment. As federal funding tightens and global competition accelerates, universities are being asked to do more with less. But they are also being asked to redefine their value, not just as centers of knowledge, but as engines of innovation, economic mobility, and societal progress. Leading the charge are Vice Presidents for Research and Chief Innovation Officers who must now strategically think not only about what research is done, but also why, how it's translated, and who benefits. Today's panel brings together university leaders who are doing exactly that. They are navigating complex decisions about how to prioritize innovation, commercialize ideas, and ensure that research serves both institutional goals and broader societal needs. Today, we'll be exploring how intellectual property and licensing literacy among leadership shapes strategic decisions, how research and innovation align or sometimes conflict with broader university missions, and how leaders are adapting to a future that demands greater accountability, impact, and inclusivity. So to start, my first question will be going to all of the panelists. To start us off, how does research and innovation align with your university's broader mission, especially in a time of evolving national priorities and constrained federal budgets? Tough question, but I know we all have an answer for that.
Yeah, I could start, Almesha. Thank you. I think as a public land and sea grant university, research, innovation, and commercialization is really a key part of the University of Georgia's mission. I had actually been at the university for a few years before when I discovered that our mission statement actually includes the phrase technology transfer designed to benefit the well-being of the citizens of Georgia. So it's right there in the mission statement, technology transfer. And I think, despite this evolving landscape, which we were just chatting at breakfast about, it's hard to predict sort of where things are going on the federal funding landscape. I think that championing that innovation and the enhancement of the lives of Georgians as well as citizens around the world will always be a part of the mission of the University of Georgia.
At Georgia State, it is somewhat baked into our priorities, and it is, research and innovation is one of the strategic pillars. We do have 4 pillars in our new strategic plan, and the reason for that is because Georgia State is somewhat unique in the sense that it's an R1 university, but also has this open access mission. So we see research and innovation as part of one of the vehicles or levers we can use, and also in a student success mission. But at the same time, we also care about how some of the knowledge that comes out of the university could actually help the immediate communities. And in addition to that, we want to be able to support the work of our faculty and researchers to also kind of elevate the prestige and of the university, because we think it's all tied in. So we don't want to kind of do it in silos, because at the end of the day, we want to be able to elevate the prestige of the university so we can gain enrollment, and also it could help with potentially retention and recruitment of even faculty.
So at Morehouse School of Medicine, we see research and innovation as tied together and embedded in our mission. Similar to the other institutions, we don't see them as separate. In fact, research and innovation helps drive our mission. And so our mission in leading in the creation and advancement of health equity towards health justice, all of that is embedded around our research and innovation opportunities, whether it is expanding the diversity in the workforce or engaging communities around health equity research and creating products that help improve the health of our community. So it is embedded in a part of who we are.
Yeah, I think I echo many of my colleagues' sentiments here at Georgia Tech. Our mission statement is to develop leaders who advance technology and improve the human condition. We see improving the human condition through tech transfer and commercialization and entrepreneurship as fundamental to the way we operate. We are halfway through the execution of our strategic plan leading up to 2030. And one of our 4 big bets is entirely around commercialization and tech transfer and entrepreneurship. We've invested a lot. We've come a long way over the last 5 years, but we feel like we have a lot of room to grow.
Similarly, Emory's mission is to create, preserve, teach, and apply knowledge in the service of humanity. That application is baked into our work in innovation, commercialization, and throughout many of the pillars and strategic goals of Emory. For example, in 2023, the last ranking that was done, Emory is 3rd in the world for drug development, second only to the NIH and the entire University of California system. And Emory is this big, so David and Goliaths. But it is, I think, exemplary of the investment that's put into it.
Absolutely. Certainly what you heard here is how the work that we are doing as higher education institutions is advancing U.S. competitiveness and innovation. So kudos to all the work that you're doing at your various universities. My next question, and I will start with you, Donald. How well do you think that senior leadership, include VPRs, understand the complexities of intellectual property, licensing, and commercialization? And how might that understanding or lack thereof influence funding or strategic decisions?
I think, of course, there are a few that would somewhat see it as a checkbox, right? Mm-hmm. Something you gotta have or do. But I think the majority of leadership, including me, kind of see it as somewhat of a prepayment, for the future. And I think if you think about the return on investment in terms of outside of the university, we're a state school, we're preparing the next generation for the workforce in the state. And I think that's kind of some of the prepayment that we do, because we, as I said earlier, we think a lot about how we prepare the students with the skills they need to go out. But also within the university, I think there's certain return on investment. And one thing, as I said earlier, also we care about recruitment, we care about retention, and we want to create an environment for not only the faculty, but also the students to succeed. So even though there's not a dollar amount per se you can put in terms of the return on investment at the bottom line, but there are a lot of all these other areas that you actually gain some of the return on investment, and those are some of the reasons why I think leadership is committed to support research and innovation. Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to do a follow-up question. How do you bridge the gap between innovation strategy and economic and decision-making? Derek, I'll pass that to you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think in my experience, when talking with senior leadership, it's important to really talk about the impact of the commercialization activity and within the context of the mission, which we all talked about. So I think really keeping leaders informed about the impact that's coming out of that research. For example, UGA's president, Jerry Moorhead, he often cites the number of products that are coming out of UGA research, which, go back 10 years, that was not really part of the conversation. And so often get calls from the president's office like, how many products are we going to have this year? So that's a good and a bad thing, I think, a little pressure, but it's also encouraging that they're paying attention. And I think the fact that UGA's been ranked either first or second for new products reaching the market for the last 9 years helps. I think that you also like to hear relatable stories, so particular products that have come out, like thinking about in the agriculture industry, 90% of the peanuts grown in the Southeast were developed at UGA. We had a rare disease therapy that was developed by a startup company. That company was acquired for $8 billion. So those are stories that leaders can convey. But I think really framing those conversations in the context of impact can really help facilitate that strategic decision making. Because yes, it requires resources, as Donald said, prepayment, to move these things forward. So you've got to make that investment up front. I think he hit a key note: recruiting and retaining, both faculty, staff, and students is critical. Most faculty want to see the impact of their work outside of the academic realm. So I think framing it in that larger context is helpful, rather than just the nuts and bolts of we need this much money for patents or we need this much money to support startups. Kind of being a holistic approach is helpful.
Very good. How many of you, by show of hands, also use that metrics in terms of products? A little bit. You don't want to, right? That was a trick question. So, Dr. Kittles, I'll throw this question at you. Given today's federal funding challenges, how do you prioritize research and innovation within the limited university budgets? That's if you have a limited budget. What tough trade-offs have you had to make, and how do you make those decisions?
Oh, it's very difficult. I'll just be honest. And today's federal landscape is just ever-changing and extremely frustrating, but one that has actually brought the organization together, and I think we're going to be stronger after all of this as an organization. One of the things that I think is critically important is that we be strategic and not sort of expansive in our thinking and in our activities. And so we double down in an area around mission alignment. So we prioritize initiatives or opportunities based on our mission, right? And then we also really double down in this space around research development. And so we are extremely active with junior faculty, mid-career faculty, to leverage their talent and skills so that they would have increased opportunity to bring in bigger awards. So we've made that investment. But we also have made sure that we don't necessarily add more silos than are already existing. So in fact, what we're doing is collapsing some of these silos and creating these broader cores that have institutional sort of commitment beyond just their area. And so all of those are important areas in which we have been able to galvanize the organization. And a lot of this is, of course, you need, it's not like there's 3 leaders in the room making all these decisions, but you have sort of like faculty governance, research advisory groups, all contributing in this discussion.
Thank you. How many of you are starting to think about what your strategy would be going into the next? I know you're working, some of you are working on your strategic plan, but right now, how many of you are thinking about what next year would look like for you, given the challenges in the federal funding?
Yeah.
Okay. What are some of the strategies that you're employing?
So I noticed something in the question as well. We are exploring quite a bit in terms of what other channels of funding can be. I think philanthropy is something that we have to lean into. Philanthropy has benefits and it is challenging, but I think the timing is right. So philanthropy is something that we are heavily leaning into to raise funding. The industry collaboration, I think we have to become better partners to universities and provide value proposition. And then the last thing, which might be somewhat counterintuitive, is we're also investing in spin-outs from Georgia Tech. And I'm sure a lot of my colleagues do as well. This is not going to be in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years in terms of payoff. I think it's going to pay off in the long run, but we are betting on our faculty and students. And so we have now investment vehicles where we invest in spin-outs from Georgia Tech, both on the faculty side and on the student side.
Anyone else want to answer that question? Anything you're doing uniquely to plan for the next year?
Not really, but I think we're all probably we've done a lot of modeling, financial modeling, to look at the worst case scenario, the best case scenario. Especially, I think, if there's a reduction in the IDC rate that we've all talked about. So we have to really think about how we provide different services within the university. What are some of the things you can move from traditionally IDC or indirect funding to direct funding? So we're all doing these types of modeling and trying to figure out how we can survive.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, that we are facing as VPRs and Deans of Innovation, because when you look at the 15%, the challenge is that many of the tech transfer offices operated from the indirect costs because there's not any direct funding for tech transfer. Even though the CHIPS and Science Act had a provision in there for tech transfer, it was never funded. Correct. So that's a huge challenge. But thank you all so much for the work that you're doing at your various institutions. How do you foster a culture that encourages cross-disciplinary, translational, or risk-taking research, especially when resources are tight? And we're using this word a lot because we know it's tight. And the economic reward systems don't always align with commercialization. So how do we make sure we foster that culture on our campuses?
Yeah. So the thing that's worked remarkably well for us at Georgia Tech in terms of getting our researchers and faculty excited about commercialization, in a very counterintuitive fashion, was we invested a lot into student entrepreneurship. So we right now operate at a scale where we're working with 5,000 plus students every year through our platforms, and we launch over 125 startups that are student founded. That has gotten our faculty and researchers really excited because they look at what students are doing and they're like, why wouldn't I jump in and do this? So that helps in terms of getting them activated, but you still have to send strong signals to faculty that we are here to support them. I'm so proud that the state of Georgia, the Board of Regents, now has a Regents Entrepreneur designation for faculty members from our schools who have been successful doing commercialization. That's a strong signal. We have Mary Albertson is here in the audience who leads our tech licensing office. We have, I think, one of the friendliest startup licenses now in the country for our faculty. And then I mentioned the investment fund. So we are saying, look, we are not just asking you to go off and do all this, but we will put money behind what you're doing. All these signals have tremendously helped.
Very good. Derek, anything you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's got to start at the top, right? I think the leadership has to set the tone, just like Siva mentioned. I think they also have to actively work to remove barriers. So if you're talking about cross-disciplinary research, like how do you share credit across different schools and colleges to make sure that's more of a seamless process? And I think when we started our UGA Innovation District Initiative, President Morehead, when he launched it, he said the future success of this institution lies in its ability to find solutions to pressing challenges, to develop new ways of thinking and doing, and support the jobs, companies, and industries of the 21st century. So that's all going to require interdisciplinary research. So he backed that up with a presidential interdisciplinary seed grant, which requires workers, researchers from across the different colleges to come together and focus on a key priority for the institution. They also have to identify where's that follow-on funding going to come from if their seed grant sort of progresses the research. So that's one thing. And I think our team science initiative, where we're looking at how do we train leaders to lead some of these large interdisciplinary grant efforts, as well as providing project manager support for that, and the grant writing and sort of organization of all the components that need to go into those large grants. So those are a few of the things we're doing. And one of the things sort of I'm excited about is the Faculty Innovation Fellows program. So it's sort of a two-way street. It'll be equipping these faculty members with knowledge about the innovation district so they can go out and share that with their colleagues, but also doing customer discovery within their individual colleges. So we'll have 20, once we have a School of Medicine and School of Nursing that's coming along, we'll have 20 colleges and schools within the University of Georgia. So that's a great platform for cross-disciplinary research. Also challenging because each of those schools have a different culture. So they all doing customer discovery to really understand like how can colleagues from the School of Social Work or Public Health, or engineering, how do they see the district and how they get involved in a way that resonates with their career goals as well. So.
Has anyone thought about culture change or culture shift as part of the dynamics to foster this culture of innovation?
I guess, yeah. So, but in terms of, in addition to what Derek said, but in addition to that, we do things like just recognizing the faculty. So now we have, I think, thanks to our director, we celebrate National Inventors Day. We have a lunch ceremony, and we recognize faculty with patents and disclosures, and we give them a little award they can take, just to kind of get the campus going and just to recognize the faculty and they feel good about the stuff they do.
Now, I would ask this question. It's not one that we discuss, but have any of your institutions adopted the PTI model, promotion and tenure and innovation and entrepreneurship, as a way to foster that culture, especially among faculty?
Well, it's integrated in that process. It's not clearly defined, but depending on the culture of the institutions, it's a part of the thinking and that process of promotion and tenure. So, I really enjoy being at Morehouse School of Medicine because of that. We see, the development of intellectual property and invention and opportunities to increase royalties as a way to progress in terms of your profession. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. What's your view on balancing traditional academic excellence, like publication and grants, with metrics like patents, startups, and industry engagement? Are those equally valued at your institution's definition of success?
Yeah, so when I did my first startup, it was before I had gotten tenure at Georgia Tech. And I remember, this is way back, when I submitted my tenure package, there wasn't a place where I could say that I'd done a startup and raised money and took product to market. To Troy's point, that's dramatically changed now. I think more and more commercialization metrics are being given consideration in promotion and tenure decisions. But I would argue that it's still not at the same level as teaching and research. It's going to take time for us to get there, but I think it's trending in the right direction. And the environment has never been better in terms of why we should give importance to commercialization metrics.
Do you have anything to add from Emory University?
I Very similar, I think.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I do want to chime in though, real quick.
Yes, absolutely.
I actually think that given the federal sort of environment,
Yeah.
there will be some challenges and changes that occur in this promotion and tenure process. It has to, given the reduction in the gold standard of R01s, okay? And so I think a lot of these the P&T committees are going to have to rethink sort of and look at what else they can value besides that traditional gold standard.
Absolutely.
Well, there has been for a long time the PDPTIE or
PTI.
yeah, right, association, and we have members of it at Emory that have looked at those promotion and tenure criteria. I don't think they've gotten much traction until now.
Yeah.
So I actually think in bad times, right, we look for good opportunities. I think this is one of the opportunity times because we're not going to be able to count on the R01 as the gold ring anymore.
Yep.
So how do we value all of these other fabulous entrepreneurial commercialization activities? This is the time to, because promotion and tenure committees are looking at that right now. How do we reevaluate all that is good if you can't get an R01? Or if you had 4 R01s and they were all just terminated. So I love the fact that this is a time for opportunity.
I love that. It's indeed time. We have to be innovative right now. We're looking at the current landscape, and we don't know how long this would happen or how far it would go. So I love that answer. And I'll put this back to you, Deb. Looking ahead, what changes do you believe university leadership must make now to position research and innovations as an enduring pillar of institutional strength and societal relevance?
Well, I think you've heard that most of our missions include this. So I don't think it's going away, but then there's always the dynamic tensions of budgets and what brings in money now and how we afford that versus things that are futuristic. And we know we have to invest before we see that return on investment. I think that most universities that are doing this understand the value because they've seen a return on investment. The issue is sometimes that runway is extremely long. For instance, in drug discovery, if you're in biotech, it is frankly easier to be in tech than it is to be in bio because those pesky clinical trials tie us up for years. However, when you see things like Emtreva, developed by doctors Ray Shinazi and Dennis Leota, both members of this esteemed organization. Emtreva is an antiviral. 95% of patients with HIV for many years was using that drug in combination with others. The return on investment there was then reinvested into something called Drive, which is a nonprofit arm of Emory that is for commercialization. So seeing the value, reinvesting some of those things give you hope for the future, even though you know that every drug is not going to be Emtreva. But it really, it's part of the mission and then just promotes that hope that we've got to sustain it. So again, the tension here is with all the budget cuts, with FNAI, et cetera, how do we preserve this so that when we come through this, and we will come through this, like we've come through ups and downs before, we don't want it to go away. And that's the critical part.
Absolutely.
I think Deb hit a key point. It's understanding the timeline. You're going to have to invest. It may be years. If you think about getting the funding to do the work, doing the work, making the discovery, filing for IP protection, all of that, especially in the biomedical space. So I think if institutions think of this as a quick way to fill in the gap for federal funding, that's not how it works. It's the long game, and you've got to invest in that, and those payoffs will come, but it's going to take time.
Absolutely. What's one shift in thinking that university leaders must make to unlock the full potential of innovation at their institutions? And each of you can answer this question.
Okay.
Content to you, Derek.
Sure. I think sort of two things. They need to celebrate the impact. We've talked about that. And I think really embrace the importance of innovation sort of in driving regional economic development, because I think that's a growing role for universities. And I think back to recruiting, retaining, faculty, staff, and students. So I think really embracing that and celebrating it are key.
I think we probably should look at it more as an ecosystem, that successes in any space or any university contributes to this ecosystem. And so I don't think we should see it as winners and losers. I think all of us are just in this together. That's the way I view it.
Yep. So I think we need to change. Well, not everyone needs to change, but I think this is an opportunity to see innovation or view innovation as not a side activity, but something that's embedded in the. You were talking about the ecosystem, embedded in the organization in its core function, and it helps drive mission, revenue, and relevance for the institution. So looking at sort of evaluating what innovation means to the organization, I think would be a good change.
So I have somewhat of a philosophical answer to this question. For those of you who sort of track history of universities, if you sort of go back 1,000 years when Oxford University and University of Bologna came along, universities used to be centers of excellence for knowledge sharing, teaching. We were teaching institutions. And then in the early 1800s, the Humboldt University of Berlin came along and said, no, we can be centers of excellence for knowledge discovery. We can do research and teaching at the same time, and we can be centers of excellence for both. And then Johns Hopkins, sort of in the US, was one of the first prototypical university to do both. I think we are at a moment in time where universities are being challenged to emerge as centers of excellence for impact. We have to be better custodians of delivering impact through the technologies and the talent that we are developing. We cannot afford to outsource it and say, hey, somebody on the outside will take our students and will take our research and create impact. We have to be better custodians. Hopefully 100 years from now, people are looking back at this moment and saying, wow, universities went through that third phase of evolution and they became centers of excellence for impact in addition to knowledge sharing and discovery. And I think university leaders need to embrace that.
I think that faculty need to see that there's an investment, especially with shrinking federal dollars. So even small seed funds go a long way these days. So we have a couple of venture funds, and that's critical. It's not a lot of money, but it means the world to getting started. So to see that investment is critical. To see facilitation of partnerships with industry, partnerships with other university. Emory and Georgia Tech have a phenomenal joint partnership in the biomedical engineering program. It's consistently number one or up in the top 5 of the United States. And the productivity out of that is really tremendous. And then the other issues are what we've already touched on, that promotion and tenure has to recognize this. It used to be a sidebar thing, like you do your research and teaching and then you do this somehow at night and the weekends, I don't know. But it's got to be more central to promotion and tenure. And again, I just want to stress the opportunity for that. And then celebrating. We have awards every year. We celebrate the teams, not the individuals, for their best deal, best product, fastest to market. I mean, we have lots of awards, and bring the whole teams up and recognize that this is a big interdisciplinary team effort.
Thank you all so much. If you're not familiar with PTIE, you can go to ptie.org and you'll find all the information there. But we do have a few minutes if we have any questions from the audience. Our panel, there's the Rich.
And unemployment rate rates for recent college grads have been the highest they've ever been. For the first time, unemployment rate for new college grads is more than the national average. There has never been a better time, but at the same time, the cost of entrepreneurship has dropped quite a bit. I think universities need to be doing a much better job in terms of helping students understand how they can deliver impact and they can control their destinies better through entrepreneurship and commercialization. Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So we've seen the percentage of students who applied to Georgia Tech who say, I'm coming there and I want to be trained in entrepreneurship, shoot up over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Here. You want to answer?
yeah, we also have an Entrepreneurship and Innovation Institute that, in my view, it's more vibrant than the faculty side. And we also have an incubator we call Launch that is part of our, which just primarily focus on students. And indeed, it brings in a lot of students, and the students do benefit from that.
Yeah. Yeah, UG has a number of programs too. To your question about freshmen, so we have a living learning community, so freshmen can apply to be in a residence hall with other sort of entrepreneur-minded students. So even before they're, start classes, they're engaging in that, they're building that community, and they have special programming to help them, if they have an idea or a company, help grow that or help them launch something based on that idea.
Yeah, I think this is a very good discussion. But one comment I will have is the discussion needs to be spread out. It's not like the discussion within the panel. And so we have so many universities in the United States. And so somehow we need to find a uniform strategy across the country, what we need to do. I think this is an urgent moment, and we all realize that in the panel discussion, but I think as a country as a whole, hundreds, thousands universities, we probably do not have that view. So how we can do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Georgia's fortunate to have an entity called the Georgia Research Alliance, which really is focused on, pulling discoveries out of the university, particularly in the startup space. So I think, you heard other panelists allude to sort of that regional approach, and I think that's critical in terms of having a nationwide regional approach. That I need somebody smarter than me to figure that one out, but I do think it's something that, the timing is right to really look more closely at how do we kind of embolden universities to really invest in this area in terms of innovation and commercialization.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question on the back.
Hi, thank you very much for the inspiring and interesting discussion. So I'm Zhen Xu from University of Michigan, and my question is that I feel like there is a public perception nowadays, partially due to the presidential messages that the government funding or taxpayers' money, right? I wouldn't say shouldn't, just that reduction of funding seems to be justified by certain view. What's the strategy from the leadership to go out and give messages not to our professors, not to the peers, but to the public, general public, to change that perception or increase the awareness in terms of why the government should continue to put money and funding to support university research? And also, I think that's important for philanthropy too. Why should the donors support the universities? Any strategy to help with that?
So I can take a stab at it. I'm going to be somewhat critical about ourselves, universities, in terms of how we articulate research value and the value of the impact that we are having. Universities typically do three things to articulate research value today. One, they will provide anecdotal stories, which is important, right? Like, oh, we did this specific project and it helped this specific community. But it doesn't represent the entire research enterprise. Second, we point to some commercialization metrics, number of startups launched, number of jobs created. But again, if you really look at it and scrutinize it, those research metrics actually represent a very small percentage of the research enterprise within the university. The third thing, very weirdly, that universities will do to articulate research value is they'll point to the research budget, which is crazy because research budget is an input metric. You should not be pointing to that as the research value. Having said that, I think each of our universities, we're doing incredibly valuable research. And we have to be better at articulating how that research converts into value for the society that we are a part of, right? And I see at Georgia Tech, we have kickstarted a process over the last year or so where we are trying to articulate research value in a much more comprehensive fashion. And I'm sure there are efforts going on in each of our universities. So going back to the question, I think it's a messaging problem. And Deborah mentioned this, when there is a crisis, there is also an opportunity. And I think we should come out of this crisis knowing better how to articulate the value of the research that we're doing.
We've started a Institute of Public Scholarship and have just a couple months ago did our first cohort boot camp training. And this is for any institution. People came from all over the country for this. Because one of the things that has gotten us to where we are today is that we have not been able to articulate the impact of the federal investment in academics. And our communications groups, just as you were saying, are working harder to be able to communicate the scope of impact. But individual faculty are very good at talking to other faculty and peers, and we don't have good training in public scholarship. And so I think that this is becoming a mandate for universities that part of our responsibility is to engage better with the public, with federal legislators, and so we're working really hard at that. And there should be novel ways that we can do this. For instance, we had something for a while called Science Gallery, which is the collision of art and science for public consumption. I think that there's lots of creative ways to bring the public in. We haven't all explored them, or we do them briefly. They're often on the cutting list when budgets are low. But I think we need to be more creative in that space.
Yeah, and I think most universities are doing a better job of telling the stories of new products or new technologies that impact society. But I think we also need to be careful to tell the whole origin of those things, because a lot of times 20 years ago, basic research sort of set the stage that now is leading to products. So at UGA, we had an investigator a long time ago who was interested in why does a sea pansy emit light? Like, what is bioluminescence? And he was able to clone out the gene that caused that, and that's been in a number of products. So as reporter constructs in biomedical research, as ways to detect blood spatter at a crime scene. I mean, so making sure that it's not just the applied research that we're talking about, but the basic research that forms the building blocks that lead to some of these technology advances that might have started, 20 or 30 years ago.
I think the question, though, is pretty broad. But part of the question that I think we really need to talk about is the lay public's lack of trust, or their disbelief in science. And that is helping to drive what's happening at the federal level. And I think for all researchers, we have that challenge of articulating what we do to the lay in a way that they get excited, they participate, they lobby or fund, to fund or whatever. But we don't do that well as institution, at the institutional level. Some institutions do it better than others. But one of the things that we at the Morehouse School of Medicine have been doing, and we've been doing this since day one, is that we've been engaged with the community as partners. And so we grab our students, whether they're medical students or PhD in the JEBS program, from these communities. We engage the community in terms of research. So it's interesting because at some level, some of these communities are just as savvy and really upset about what's going on at the federal level, because we've partnered with these guys and had sub-awards and partnered with HRSA community grants and NIH grants. And so they've been hit hard too. And so that is sort of, I think, how you sort of disseminate and spread that information and create that trust.
Yeah, I think you hit on a great point that it's not just the universities that are, suffering from this downturn in terms of research. We have time for one last question. Hearing none, I want to thank our panelists for the great and insightful discussion that we've had this morning. I know it was early, but it was a good discussion. What we heard today reinforces that research and innovation are no longer add-ons to the university mission. They are integral to how we educate, serve communities, and drive national competitiveness. We also heard that understanding intellectual property, supporting tech transfer, and prioritizing commercialization are leadership responsibilities, not just technical tasks. Whether it's fostering equitable innovation, aligning limited resources with long-term goals, or simply being bold enough to shift the institutional culture, this work takes vision, courage, and collaboration. To our panelists, thank you for your leadership and your candor, because I know we said some stuff today that we know that needs to change in our institutions. And to our audience, thank you for the questions and thank you for your engagement. Let's keep pushing the conversation forward, because the future of innovation leadership is being shaped right now by the people in this room. Thank you.